Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from where you're watching us from. My name is Melody Wanjiro and welcome to our newest podcast session with me and a guest who is with us in the building. But before we continue, have you subscribed to our YouTube channel? If not, kindly subscribe, share, comment, and do not forget to like the button so that anytime we post, unapata notification. Also, do not forget to follow us on other social media handles that is Maono Africa Center for Transformation on Facebook page, Maono Africa on Instagram, Maono Africa on X app, and finally, Maono Africa on TikTok. Get to see the latest moves and any other updates that we have been posting. And without further ado, I want us to go and get to know our guest. Tujue ametoka wapi, what he does, and who he is. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Melody.
Yes.
My name is Samuel Munyowing. I work with the African Institute for Children's Studies. I'm a founder member, and I would also want to say that in the space on protection of human rights, especially matters of child labor and human trafficking, I've been privileged to serve in many spaces, including the National Technical Committee on Child Labor.
You're welcome. Karibu sana Dandora.
Thank you very much.
So we are celebrating the International Day of Human Trafficking in Persons, and we can separate it. We have the human trafficking and we have trafficking in persons. So maybe you can get us to understand what we mean by human trafficking and also trafficking in person.
Yes, so there is, I think a very good point to base this is from the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights that also tries to map out what are some of the risks that are there. So we do have scenarios where people intentionally identify people who are at risk, meaning they are vulnerable, they have certain desire either because of political reasons or because of economic reasons to be able to move into certain safer spaces. And so you find a lot of, migration of people that people can be taken advantage of as they try and move on to new labor markets. And we've seen this especially in the context of Eastern Africa, that there is going to be a lot of movement of people either to Asia. We've seen also a movement going up towards Ethiopia and Djibouti, going into the Mediterranean, and of course down south as we see people move towards South Africa. So there's been that element of movement of people and of course the risk of being exploited in that journey. There are, of course, people who are organized crimes that are also coming into the space, looking at the issues of people being exploited either for labor again, or sometimes even for human body parts. We've seen that happening. So there is an element of an organized crime syndicate that moves people, sometimes via very clandestine systems. Very recently we had trucks that are disguised as water bowsers that you will find that people are being put under them. So there is that conflict where then you're seeing people in an organized trafficking syndicates that are moving people from one location to another one. Yes.
Nice. And now that this month, we are celebrating it, and the theme is Leave No Child Behind in Fight Against Human Trafficking. Why the theme?
Yes, I think this theme is very timely, and maybe should not even be a one-year focus, because globally you will notice that a lot of the human trafficking and organized crime has often targeted almost half of the victims, children and young people. And therefore, while it's been known that sometimes we have a focus on the adults who are being moved, and I'll just give you an example. When you look at the Kenya report on human trafficking and the counter-trafficking programs, we had in the 2023 year an estimated between 35 and 40,000 people who are being moved in the human and trafficking syndicates. And half of that were children.
Yeah.
And when you say children, you're talking about persons below 18 years of age. But also increasingly we were seeing that the young people are quite vulnerable because there is a phase where a lot of young people don't complete their primary education. And so again, if you take the example of Kenya, we have about 1 million young people who sit for their first Kenya certificate of primary education. So they have finished the first part of the basic education, but only a half of that transition. So you're talking about between 14-year-old and 16-year-old having quite almost 500,000 always going into the labor market, so to say, completely unprepared because they've not been able to go to school, to their secondary school, and they're not transitioning into the workspace. So that's part of the challenge that we are noticing, that group becomes very vulnerable. And you can imagine as a young person, you really are at the height of your energy levels are great. A 14-year-old to a 24-year-old is one of the best years you can have in life. And if there's nothing properly engaging, you become very vulnerable to anything promising. And so you see almost a similar trend from young people who want to leave the rural areas into the urban areas, hoping there is a better opportunity. But then when you land there, there's really nothing much that is organized. You know, our industries are not at their best. The job creation is not happening in many sectors, and therefore that's where the challenge. So it is a high vulnerability group among the children and the young people to human trafficking. And therefore, if we are going to have an effective mechanism to both do a prevention and response, it therefore requires that we must leave no children behind, even as we do our programming around human trafficking.
Thank you. I like the fact that you said it should not be a one-time thing. Maybe what is it that we are doing, and we are not doing it in a unique way to make it the campaign to be known and something that is not only once done. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think the challenge with some of these kind of campaigns is, I mean, if you talk about 40,000 people in a country of 54 million, sometimes it may look like, but how many? It doesn't look like it's a daily occurrence. And again, because it is very, it happens in a way that is not very obvious for many people. I'll give you an example. There are a lot of situations where very unfortunate events, a child loses the parents. And, you know, we see people go do the burials in the community, and everyone says, no worry, we'll take care of this child. And quickly, no one really is doing all those support in terms of education and many other things. The next thing is, oh, don't worry, come to the city, I will take you to school. So the person is coming in the guise of being taken to school, but very quickly again, you notice that they're being exploited either as child domestic workers, or, you know, or working in the farms. And therefore, you have this situation where it is sort of a clandestine, it's very hidden. A lot of these things are very hidden, and it doesn't get into the public agenda. Because a lot of decisions that politicians will make will be about the numbers. How many people are being affected? You know, it's very different from a scenario where you're noticing, oh, this huge number of people are out here. So that is one of the main problems that make it not getting to the top of the agenda of government. So if you went and asked your local member of county assembly, in the last 4 years, have you spoken about children who are being moved for exploitation? It's rarely find this space there. So that is where we really need to begin this conversation and ensure that we are able to make it a visible thing. So in one of the projects that I know Maono is involved in and my organization is involved in, we're calling it NEAR. It's not invisible anymore.
Yes.
And this is in the sense that a lot of child domestic workers are very invisible. They are working in spaces where the authorities don't get access. You don't see the labor officer come in and knock at the door and say, who is working in your house? You know? So it remains very hidden, and therefore they need to make this a priority conversation. We need to see conversations happening in the communities around who is working in your house. What are they being paid? Have they completed their education? Then that is when this will not be a matter to be discussed over one day event, but rather it needs to be a daily conversation in the community.
Yeah, we live in it, we wake up and it gets to sink in us. So now that you mentioned about the community, about the government and all that, would like you to shed some light on maybe the international laws, or rather the national laws that could be there, and maybe the community do not know about them, and how we can cascade that information down to that person who is in rural area. Yeah.
Exactly. So, like I've mentioned already, there is the International Covenant on Civil and People's Rights, which really try to bring out where are the risks for people, you know, in terms of labor issues, in terms of migration, and the need to safeguard them from exploitation. I think we need to appreciate a very unfortunate fact that human beings are naturally very selfish, and people will want to take advantage of the other people. So at global level, there's been these mechanisms that have been established through this convention to ensure that we do not have, you know, organized systems that are moving people for exploitation. And we learned back all the way from the slavery period, when Africa, for example, had a lot of people who were forced and exported for labor into other areas. So that has formed a good basis at the global level. Maybe back home is we are almost having 2 decades where we've had a very good conversation that led to the Counter-Trafficking Persons Act of the year 2010. And this really raised the bar in terms of being very clear on what are we defining as a human trafficking offense, what are we defining as the punitive measures against people who do that. And we put very tough measures, you know, so that if you are confirmed to have been involved in trafficking of people, then you will be charged almost 30 million shillings for, you know, the offense. So about $30,000, you know, for this kind of an offense, or 30 years in prison. So we seem to have very tough, very, you know, punitive things if you are caught in this. But I think the missing point is just how translatable is this? Can the police system be able to prepare a proper charge sheet? You know, if today a young person went and reported that I'm not being paid properly, we've seen, I think in Kenya so far, in the space of domestic work, we barely have about 2 or so cases that have gone through court around people who are complaining that their rights are being abused. Maybe they've come in, they were cheated into what they were supposed to be paid. Plus the complexity that a lot of times a young person who is not 18 will not have contractual, because you're not allowed to sign a contract as a young child, as a person rather, below 18 years of age. So those are some of the dynamics that have made it very difficult. That is.
Okay. So on this day, the set day that we'll be celebrating, the main purpose is to raise awareness on trafficking in person and draw the public's attention to plight of victims of trafficking. So that's the main purpose. My question is, why is it given the location that has been given? Why not into any other location? Let's say Nairobi, let's say Embu, let's say Busia. Why in Namanga?
Why in Namanga, at the border between Kenya and Tanzania? So I think the choice of the border between Kenya and Tanzania is a good one. If you look at the human trafficking, migration pathways that happen in the region, you will notice that Kenya is one into the 3 levels of migration pathway. So one, we are a source. So we have people living in Kenya trying to go find work and sometimes completely exploited. Like we've had cases of very unfortunate people being brought back in caskets, dead from working in Saudi Arabia and other places. So that's, we are a source and we are sending. But even as we think about a global migration, I think it's very important to appreciate that even locally, there are certain counties that seem to be sending people to others. So the more rural counties are more likely to send people into the more urbanized area, or also into the more agricultural areas. So that's one of the things. The other thing is that Kenya is a transit. And we are seeing that people are moving from Tanzania through Namanga into Kenya, and or from Uganda, from South Sudan, from Congo, Burundi, Rwanda. There's a lot of people moving. First of all, they come here hoping there's going to be better opportunity, and then there are those who then take advantage of that and organize them, giving them more hope, false hope, unfortunately, most times, into a better environment. So we are a destination, we are a source, but we are also a transit zone. Now, choosing border points are very, very critical, because if we are watchful around what happens at the border points, I think as recently as about 2 years ago, there was a major complaint in the suburbs in Nairobi, in the Eastleigh, where we were saying, oh, the domestic workers from South Sudan and Uganda are lowering how much we are paid as domestic workers here. And so there is an element of the cross-border point. And I know within the East African community level, there have been attempts by other groups like the IGAD and building capacity within the East African community for human rights and protecting people. So it is important that the borders are properly managed. It is important that we create community structures that can identify as soon as someone lands, who are they? Are they here legally? We want to encourage within East Africa labor migration, but it needs to be done safely.
Nice. Now, it is within us. It is in our communities. It is in the interior. We are living in it, right? Because sometimes you might find people are not careful. Someone may be traveling from that place to another, and maybe he is your neighbor, just that people do not identify this person, is not familiar with us, right? But now my question is, in as much as we as the organization, or rather the partners, we are making it not invisible anymore, what other strategies can we put in place? For example, in Maono, we are using like the theater, the sports, trying to create that awareness. In Namanga, people will be going to celebrate and commemorate that day, there will be lots of activities relating to that day. Maybe you can also cite and tell us what your organization, is doing also to make it not invisible anymore. Like bring it out that it's happening, it's there, and what can we do to end it?
Right. So overall, in any human behavior change process, it begins with people being aware, people knowing they have capacity to take action, and then building capacity of the system to take action. So I want to laud what Maono is doing in terms of using art and theater and sports as a way in which you use a platform to share information on what is human trafficking. You know, how do I know that this person is being trafficked? How do I know that there's a red flag here? This person is likely to exploit me. You know, and so I think passing that information through that space is very critical, because the first space of defense in human rights, it is the self-awareness. You know, if you're talking about children's rights, the first place where you protect children is the child themselves. When a child knows that if you touch me like this, then it is wrong, then they're able to raise a red flag, and say, look, I've realized this person is touching me incorrectly, inappropriately. So that is number one, and therefore that's very critical that we continue giving this information. If you want to be able to access job out of the country, like many of us will want to, and it's okay. How do I know that the government, the agency that is recruiting me is registered by the government? So that, how do I have measures when I land there? What are the measures that I take to ensure that I'm protected from exploitation? So that is very critical. Now, what are we doing what can other agencies do? I want to give you an example of a practical project that I did actually way back in about 2008. It was, we went back to my village. My village is in Western Kenya, in Siaya. And we realized that there are a lot of children who come into Nairobi to try and find work, and they will be dropping out of school. And so we say, this is child labor. But we asked ourselves, why are they going there? And so we noticed three things. One is the fact that people don't have food. So how do you create systems that generate food? So we got into a project at greenhouses, we had beekeeping projects, just to create employment within villages. So I think if we can have a village-centered approach, you know, I think this country has talked about it before. We've seen it in other countries like Japan. We have what we call one village, one product. Build capacity to create employment within there. The second part was build capacity for monitoring children. And so in our case, actually, before Nyumba Kumi was talked about, we started a Nyumba Kumi approach. And we were able to track every child. That village had about 1,500 households. So we had 500, we had a total of, no, about 5,000 people. So we had 520 households, Nyumba Kumi groups. And we were able to identify in every household where is this child. And through that procedure, we were able to bring back 2 children who had gone to work in the fishing space in Uganda, and they were being exploited there. So I think building community system, the Nyumba Kumi approach, is a very practical thing, but it needs to be made capable of having data. I think what we often fail in a country is we just want to say things without data. And I think if we build capacity for the community to monitor every child, then it becomes very critical. Within this NIA program and our organization as African Institute for Children's Studies, one of the roles we are doing is to build capacity upstream. Is the policy environment working? So for example, we are having the ILO Convention 189 that we've been advocating for ratification, and the ILO Convention 190. So ILO Convention 189 is looking at how do we make domestic workspace a safe space. As people migrate to come and work, how do we ensure that they are not being sexually exploited, overworked, underpaid? Then we go into the ILO Convention 190, which is looking at removing all the sexual exploitation that work in any workspace, not only in domestic space. So these are the opportunities that we need to be able to build on at national level and ensure that it's working very well. And that means we need to look at also empowerment of the labor officers. How do we empower the court system? How do we ensure the police can prepare proper charge sheet? Because that's been always a failure. You go and report a complaint, the way the police treats you, it's like there is really no case to put ahead.
Nice. Now, we have been doing the campaigns, we have been working on it, but what could be the reason as to why leaving no child behind be a challenge or be a big problem when we are trying to end it, but still, then again, it is not ending?
So one, I think it's often very easy to tell the bad story, but I really want to begin by giving hope that personally I've worked in the space on child protection, including child labor and human trafficking for close to 20 years. And I can tell you there is a big difference. At least we build systems now. There are mechanisms. Today you're able to make a phone call and people will be able to respond to a case of a child who is being exploited. We have 116, a number. One of our partners in this project, Childline Kenya, is running that. In the early 2000s, you will see children being put on a big truck in Kiambu, being moved from one village to the other one to go and pick coffee. That is now almost impossible to see. You wouldn't see that. And so there's been some progress. But we must also admit that over the years, while we've had a country that is, so to say, has moved from least developed country to low middle income, it has remained on paper, because only a few people have the wealth, So we are building better roads, yes, we're building a railway line, but does that translate into the common man and money in their pockets? So we are having an increased number of households. The inequality between the rich and the poor has really widened in Kenya, unfortunately. And therefore, the number of households that can't feed their own children, that can't take care of their own, put them in education, has increased. And therefore, that is the big challenge, that poverty is always a key factor that plays on vulnerability, and we've not been able to address that properly. But I think it's not all lost, because if we have a strong community system where we care for each other, where we think about the other person first. I always say, your child is not safe until mine is also safe. So the Ubuntu thing, you must think about the other person, make them be able to be safe, for all of us to be safe. So as long as we think like that, then we will be able to win that. But I think people have been pushed to really think about saving themselves.
I got a chance to go via your website of your organization. I liked something that I picked from it. That is the child online safeguarding information. Many a times that someone might just think it's just child picked from this side to that point, but where does it start? It must have started somewhere. So kindly shed some light on the child safeguarding topic that you have on your...
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think thank you for raising that, Melody. There are about 2 projects or issues that I've worked on in the last few years that I think are very linked to trafficking. And like you rightfully put, is the online safety for children. It is very interesting that even for households that look like they have everything that takes them away from poverty, the online space that they expose their children have been the spaces where people have been lured into. So that you will notice that even in organized gang like Al-Shabaab or the groups that have been fighting out there in Syria, we've had young people who've been trafficked because their first point of contact was online space. So really building capacity of young people to know, and parents, that giving the online, because you can afford a tablet or a phone and give it to your child, is not a cool thing unless there's a control of understanding what is in there. And let me point out something that is also very common there is self-esteem is really important. That if someone doesn't feel confident of who they are, then anyone else who gives them a sense of confidence will take them away very easily. Who gives them a sense of love will take them away. So really, as parents, we must be available. And it's just our presence that is required to be able to ensure that young people grow up feeling confident about themselves, being able to say no to people who want to make them feel bigger than they are. So online safety is a critical thing. On our website, we have tools, curriculum that you can use as schools so that you can be able to train and prepare your children. The other one that we also have materials for is substance use prevention. How can we protect young people? Again, like I said, the first line of defense is yourself. How can you prepare young people to know what to do? As a young man, I remember I sat down in what we call Simba, the little house of young boys, and someone was passing around, a little smoke, and for the first time I thought, this is marijuana, this is bang. And I thought, do I take it? Don't I take it? Because if I take it, maybe I'll be hooked forever. If I don't take it, they'll think I'm weak. And therefore, we've built an evidence-based curriculum together with our partners from the Arizona State University in the US. And this is to give skills to young people. How do I handle that situation? Because it's always this one time that changes the rest of your life. And if you're able to know how to negotiate your way, how to refuse, how to still remain in the group, but you've been able to take a step against it. So I think those are things that eventually, because when people are in drugs, they become very vulnerable to human trafficking.
Nice. And now maybe you have done some research somewhere in your organization. What's the process of reporting in case someone notices or realizes this child is not someone that I know, or this person is not someone I'm used to? What steps should someone take?
That's a very good question. Now, we have a new law, the Children's Act 2022. It's new because we had the initial law in the Children's Act 2001. And I was privileged to be part of this journey of, midwifing and preparing this new law. And one of the things we've tried to enhance is how do you do reporting? So one is the law has people that we identify as authorized officers, that if I as a public member have noticed something, where do I report? You report it to an authorized officer, and this person has the power to either report to the next level or even walk in and pick a child. So the first thing that communities must appreciate is whenever you think that a child is being at risk, call 116. The 116 has a system in which they are able to call the police officer nearby or the children officer. So the next level is, of course, then the chief in your community, your village elder, your children officer, or the police officer who is nearby you. So those systems are able to work. We've increasingly recognized Nyumba Kumi leaders because then this becomes a structure. The community health worker nearby. So all these people are people whom you can call. You can even report to the school. It is required now that the school, the health system, and the health workers, whenever they have a situation where they feel someone's rights are being
Violated, yeah.
violated, they should be able to report that and quickly address it. So those are structures that exist. We've tried to enhance how the systems work. So I sit in the National Council for Administration of Justice. We have a standing committee on justice for children. And this is a system that brings together the police, the ODPP, the prosecutor, that is, the judiciary, the prisons, the probation, the children's department. So all these people work together. We go to enhance. And in every place we have what we call the court users committee. So again, it's possible that when you report one, the whole system can be triggered. It's not yet working at its best, but we are improving that. We even, as AICS, we built a juvenile justice information management system. We've tried it out in Makadara law courts, and we want to scale this up so that more courts can have a system that if you report a case, the whole system can see that there's a case reported and it's followed through to the end.
As we come to the end of the session, I'd like you to face one of the cameras and talk to the audience matters in concern of child trafficking. Someone would be wondering, they're outside and eager to know something or two. You can talk to them.
Thank you. So in matters of child trafficking, they are real. That, like we said, in every 2 people who are being trafficked, one of them is being a child. We are having over 40,000 people, meaning you having a chance of close to 30 people every day being trafficked. And this will happen in spaces where people are seemingly giving you an opportunity for a better living. So before someone gives you a promise that this is a better opportunity for a job, to go to school, ensure that you are aware of who they are. Ensure that you are able to check with another person of what is happening. If you feel suspicious about it, and this does not have to be just the person who's being abused, it needs to be the community. Like we said earlier on, unless your neighbor's child is safe, even yours is not safe. So we need to be able to report these matters, call 116. We should be able to walk to the next police station, and there's effort being made to ensure that all these systems are responsive. And again, be aware that not everything that looks green on the other side is always green, like yours it is.
Great. And now that Sammy will be joining the team in Umanga, what are your expectations after that day, or rather on that day?
Well, like we said, I think there's always someone who's coming new who is interested in joining, and I'm hoping that through working together to raise this awareness and meeting as a team, we can expand our pool of advocates who are really standing up against human rights, child trafficking and human trafficking, but also very importantly that we can elevate this agenda. Like I said earlier on, unfortunately, this is one of those agendas that don't seem to be as important perhaps as education, but yet the moment we have 1 or 2 people who are not happy, who are brought up badly, we say people can only give you what they have. If someone has been raised up being exploited in trafficking, the best they can give you is exploitation. So the cycle continues. So the more we stop just one person, if you save one person, you've done 100%. You've done very well.
Nice. It always starts with us and it will end with us. So before just ignoring anyone that you do not realize who they are, you do not notice who they are, it's good to follow up and have the hawk eye to identify, and you can help a child somewhere that is suffering, or maybe an adult who might be suffering somewhere. So I have been your host, Melody Wanjiro, and it has been very engaging and we have learned a lot. Always leave that comment and tag someone that you feel should grace our podcast to shed more light on a topic that you feel that we should talk about. Do not forget to follow us on our social media handles, that is Maono Africa Center for Transformation on Facebook page, Maono Africa on Instagram, Maono Africa on X app, and finally Maono Africa on TikTok. Make sure that you get to see what we are doing, the content that we are creating, and whatever we are going to post. That is very beneficial. Also, do not forget to visit our safe space, that is Maono Africa Center for Transformation on Poster Building, opposite kwa Chief. Nasikianga watu wakiuliza sana, where are you guys located? Kuja hapa, let us have one, two talk, engage, alafu we get to have the information sync and we get to save a life somewhere. Thank you very much. Till next time, Kwaheri.